Hello! In this video we are going to be looking at the physicalist theory of Epiphenomenalism, which deals with a phenomenon known as emergent consciousness. But let's first look at some basics. Epiphenomenalism argues that events in the brain and body produce events in the mind, i.e. consciousness, but that those mental events have no causal influence on what happens in the brain and body, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. The philosopher Daniel Dennett is the main scholar behind the idea of epiphenomenalism, which is essentially a form of functionalism. Okay, so mental events are epiphenomena, and they emerge out of the physical processes as byproducts. Okay, and sometimes this view is known as emergent functionalism. So, the light striking your retina causes you to have the experience of seeing the tree, and further brain events cause you to form the desire to sit under it. It might be a hot day, for example. However, that desire, that conscious experience to sit under the tree, is not what causes you to sit under the tree. Rather, that conscious desire is just a product of the physical processes in your brain that are responding to the heat of the day. So, conscious desire supervenes on the physical processes but does not cause them. Now, supervenience is a key term. You need to know what it means. All right. So, if conscious desire supervenes on physical processes, then conscious desire is dependent upon those physical processes for its existence. Rather like, if you like, colour supervening on a physical object. Colour is not in itself an object, it requires an object upon which to supervene. So epiphenomenalists believe that experience and everything else that goes on in your mind has no effect at all within the deterministic universe. Right? So what causes your actions are just further purely material, unconscious brain processes related to inputs, how the brain processes those inputs, and the behavioural outputs of both yourself and other people. All right? So again, as I said just now, the idea is that consciousness is just a byproduct of the physical processes, and that any conscious desire you have does not play any causal role in you then going on and doing whatever it is you think you causally desire, right? Rather, that desire is just a byproduct of your brain processing certain inputs in particular ways and then causing you to act in other ways. So that would be the output side, the causing of the behavior. Now, epiphenomenalism is as such a dualist idea in the sense that it suggests there is consciousness and there is physical process. However, the kind of dualism that is argued for by epiphenomenalism differs from substance dualism, and that's important, right? So epiphenomenalists believe that there are physical processes and mental states, but that mental states play no role in causation. Right? So epiphenomenalists are physicalists. Now, if you think about substance dualism, right? Substance dualism suggests that mind and body are separate substances, and that the mind, the non-material mind, if you like, interacts with the physical world in a sort of causal way. All right. So epiphenomenalists are dualists in the sense that they believe in mental phenomena as distinct from physical processes, but the mental processes are not separate substances. Right? Rather, they are properties of the physical processes. So that's a fundamental difference between the dualism of epiphenomenalism and the Cartesian substance dualism idea. Okay. So substance dualists believe that the mind and body are separate, and that there is an interaction between the mind and the brain. All right? And for that reason, substance dualism is sometimes also known as interactionist dualism. Just bear that in mind because a question may be phrased in that way as well. Okay? But I emphasize again that substance dualism is very different to epiphenomenalism, the dualism in epiphenomenalism. Okay? So, as I said again just now, substance dualists believe that the immaterial mind explains our consciousness, right? It is the who we are in terms of our thoughts and feelings, whereas epiphenomenalists believe the mind plays no causal role, right? Consciousness is merely something that supervenes on the physical processes taking place inside the brain. Now, having said that, it is very important to note that the dualism of epiphenomenalism is also different from that of property dualism, and I'll come to that in the video on property dualism, which you can watch after this one. So what objections are there to epiphenomenalism? First of all, there is what is known as the causal redundancy objection. Okay, so epiphenomenalists claim that mental properties are causally redundant. They play no actual role in what we do, right? They're just a byproduct of physical processes. This is very counterintuitive because it seems obvious that mental properties, for example, how pain feels, causes us to do certain things. Right? So it causes certain other mental events and physical events. All right? So we have the feeling of pain and we wince, or if we burn our hand, we quickly withdraw it because of how it feels. Now, according to the epiphenomenalist, how it feels, the conscious experience, plays no causal role. All that's going on is that you have a hot input, your brain processes that information and then withdraws your hand as the output. Right? There is no causal role for the how it feels side of things. All right. Similarly, when you put up your hand and say what you think, what you say is caused surely by what you think. But epiphenomenalists deny this. They argue that saying what you think is caused by physical processes and not by your thoughts. And that's quite a substantial objection, I think, because obviously your thoughts do seem to be the reasons why you speak, for instance. Secondly, there is the question of free will and moral responsibility. Now, this involves just thinking a little bit about a theory known as hard determinism, which is the idea that every event is the result of a particular cause or finite set of causes. Or looked at another way, that a cause will only produce a finite series of effects. Now, if mental events have no causal influence on what happens in the brain and body, then it seems that we can't have free will, right? It seems that perhaps hard determinism is true. All our actions are related to deterministic sets of events in the brain. And even if we make some kind of quantum argument that opposes determinism, events occurring at random in the brain does not give us free will either, because free will is to have a choice. Random events are not based on choice, they're just random. So epiphenomenalists argue that whatever your choice, it is simply an effect of a brain process and not a cause of anything. So there's no sense in which you can genuinely decide or choose what to do, because obviously choice involves thought. So if you cannot genuinely choose your actions, then you cannot be held responsible for what you do, which means ultimately that you can't be held morally responsible for your actions. And again, this seems quite a substantial objection to epiphenomenalists. Now, an epiphenomenalist might reply that the idea of moral responsibility is itself a thought, and that this thought is just a byproduct of physical causes and physical effects, and they perhaps wouldn't even mind the deterministic idea. They would say, well, look, moral responsibility is just a byproduct. This idea that it feels wrong to do such and such, or that you believe it's wrong, those thoughts are just byproducts of a deterministic model of the brain, where you've got inputs that determine certain processes that in their turn determine the outputs. Right? So that's the end of this video. In the next video, we're going to take a very quick look at property dualism.